Jason had always lived a simple life, one filled with routine. His days were spent working at a local tech store, and his nights were spent doing what he loved the most, gaming. The glow of his computer screen was his only companion during those quiet evenings in his small apartment. He didn't have many friends, but in the digital world, he found a sense of belonging. For years, he had joined online forums, participating in various gaming communities, and had become well known for his sharp wit and strategic mind. Jason enjoyed the anonymity that the internet provided. Here, he could be whoever he wanted to be, without the restrictions of his quiet, unassuming life. It was during one of these late-night gaming sessions that he first encountered Aurelia. She wasn't like the others he usually met in the forums. While most of the gamers he spoke to were young men with fast fingers and loud voices, Aurelia's presence was different. Her username was simple, Aurelia_42, but her messages were anything but ordinary. She was intelligent, with an uncanny ability to predict moves in the game before they happened. Jason found himself intrigued by her. Most players spent their time boasting about their accomplishments or trash-talking, but Aurelia spoke with a calm confidence that made him feel as if he were talking to someone much older and wiser than himself. Over the next few weeks, Jason and Aurelia began to spend more and more time together, talking not just about games, but about their lives. She revealed that she was from another country, a place far away from where Jason lived, but she never mentioned the specifics. She was private, mysterious even, but in a way that didn't seem evasive. It was as if she had secrets, not out of deception, but out of a desire to protect something deeper. Jason respected that about her. He was drawn to her calm nature and her intellect. Their conversations were always deep, far beyond the usual small talk. They discussed everything from technology and space exploration to personal struggles and dreams. Every night, Jason would eagerly wait for her to log on, hoping for another conversation that would last into the early hours of the morning. One evening, after a particularly long conversation about the nature of the universe, Aurelia said something that caught Jason off guard. "I'll be visiting Earth soon," she wrote in the chat. "There's something important I need to do there, and I'll need your help." Jason stared at the screen for a moment, unsure if he had read that correctly. Visiting Earth? It didn't make sense. She had never mentioned anything about traveling. Perhaps it was just a figure of speech, or maybe she was talking about a project she was working on that required travel. Either way, Jason had to ask. "What do you mean?" he typed. Aurelia's reply came almost immediately. "I'll be traveling to your planet for a diplomatic mission. You'll understand when I get there," she wrote cryptically. "It's something big. It will change everything." Jason rubbed his eyes, unsure if he was imagining things. Diplomatic mission? This sounded like some kind of joke. Yet her tone was so serious, so confident, that he couldn't dismiss it completely. He tried to keep his cool, but curiosity got the better of him. "When will you be here?" "In a few weeks," she replied. "Don't worry about the details. Just know that I'll need your assistance." Jason was both excited and confused. Was she joking? Was she some sort of elaborate online persona who was just playing with him? He couldn't be sure, but the possibility that this might be real intrigued him. He decided to take her seriously. After all, the idea of an adventure was tempting. The days that followed were filled with anticipation. Jason couldn't stop thinking about her. He found himself checking the clock, counting down the days until Aurelia would arrive. He even started to make preparations, although he wasn't entirely sure what for. He cleaned his apartment, stocked up on snacks, and rearranged his living space in case she really did visit. He told himself that it was silly to prepare for something he wasn't even sure would happen, but the thought of meeting her, of finally speaking in person after all these weeks, made his heart race. Then, one afternoon, he received a message that would change everything. "I'm here," Aurelia wrote. Jason's pulse quickened. He glanced at the message, and felt a sudden rush of excitement. She was really here. This wasn't some elaborate prank. The mystery that had surrounded Aurelia for so long was about to unravel. He checked the time. 5 p.m. He looked out the window, expecting to see something small and ordinary. A car, perhaps, or maybe a plane. But when he stepped outside, he saw nothing but a clear sky. No sign of Aurelia's arrival. Maybe he had misunderstood. Maybe she meant she had arrived in the area, but not yet at his house. Just as he was about to head back inside, he heard a low hum above him. He looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Hovering just above his apartment was a ship, a craft that appeared to be made of gleaming silver and dark reflective material. It wasn't like anything Jason had ever seen before. The ship was sleek, with sharp edges that seemed to shimmer under the sun. It didn't make a sound, except for that faint hum, as if it were suspended in midair by some invisible force. Jason took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He was sure he was dreaming. This couldn't be happening. But then a voice crackled through his phone, and it was Aurelia's voice. "Jason," she said calmly, as though nothing was out of the ordinary. "I've arrived. Come outside." Jason's mind raced as he stepped back out onto the street, his eyes fixed on the spacecraft. His feet felt like they were made of lead as he walked toward the ship. What was happening? Was this real? He had to be dreaming. The ship landed softly in his yard, just a few feet from where he stood. The ground didn't shake, and no dust was kicked up. It was as if the ship had been placed there with the utmost precision. The door to the ship opened slowly, and out stepped Aurelia. She looked even more beautiful in person, if that was possible. She wore a simple outfit, something that seemed both futuristic and familiar, like a blend of modern-day fashion and something from a time beyond Earth. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, met his, and for a moment, Jason forgot how to breathe. She was taller than he had expected, with graceful movements that suggested power and purpose. But it wasn't just her appearance that stunned him. It was the way she carried herself. There was an air of authority about her, a quiet confidence that commanded respect. She didn't seem out of place at all, despite the strange nature of the situation. "I made it," Aurelia said, smiling. "I hope you're ready for what comes next." Jason stood there, speechless. He couldn't believe this was happening. This wasn't just an online chat anymore. This was real. Then, just as Jason was about to say something, he noticed something. Several figures stepping out from behind Aurelia, tall and imposing, their armor gleaming in the light. They weren't human. These beings were unlike anything he had ever seen before. They had sleek, alien features, and their uniforms were adorned with strange symbols that Jason couldn't decipher. They were warriors, her soldiers. No doubt, Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had thought he was meeting a woman from another country, but this was no ordinary visit. Aurelia wasn't just a traveler, she was a leader, and she had brought an army. The soldiers moved into position, their eyes scanning the area with sharp precision. Jason could feel the tension in the air. They weren't here for a friendly visit. They had a mission. "Aurelia, what's going on?" Jason finally managed to ask, his voice shaky. "We're here for something much bigger than just a visit, Jason," Aurelia replied. "I've brought my forces to ensure the success of a mission that involves not just my people, but yours as well. There's much more at stake than you can imagine." Jason stood there, dumbfounded. This was more than just a casual meeting. He was in the middle of something far beyond his understanding. Aurelia turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "I hope you're ready for what's coming. You'll have a role to play in all of this, Jason. You won't be alone." Jason's mind raced as he stood there, trying to process what had just happened. His simple life had just been turned upside down, and he had no idea what to expect next. Jason still couldn't believe what had just happened. Aurelia, the woman he had been speaking to for weeks, had just landed a spaceship in his yard, one that seemed like something out of a sci-fi movie. Her alien soldiers, tall and imposing, had followed her out of the ship. The scene felt surreal, like something you'd see in a dream or a movie, not in real life. Yet, here he was, standing in his front yard, staring at what could only be described as a small army. Aurelia, noticing his shock, smiled faintly and took a step forward. Her eyes were calm, but there was an unmistakable air of command about her. She didn't seem to notice the strange circumstances. To her, this was just another day in her mission. The soldiers, who had once appeared so intimidating, now seemed like her protective detail, and their movements were deliberate, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. "You must be wondering what this is all about," Aurelia said, her voice soft but filled with authority. Jason nodded, still trying to make sense of it all. His brain was struggling to process what was happening. Just hours ago, he was sitting at his computer, talking to a mysterious woman online. Now, he was standing face to face with her, surrounded by beings that could have been from another world. "Come inside," Aurelia continued. "We need to talk." Jason hesitated for a moment. His apartment wasn't exactly designed for hosting intergalactic guests, let alone a squad of alien soldiers, but the situation was too far beyond his control to protest. He stepped aside, allowing Aurelia and her soldiers to follow him into the house. The soldiers remained at attention, standing just inside the door, while Aurelia made herself comfortable on the couch. Jason could hardly focus on anything but the strange weight in the air. He could feel the tension, the seriousness of the situation pressing in on him. This was far more than some casual visit from a stranger he had met online. The gravity of it was becoming clearer with each passing second. Aurelia glanced around the room, her eyes scanning the space. "This is much simpler than what I'm used to," she commented, almost to herself. "But I suppose that's to be expected." Jason watched her, still processing everything. His mind was racing with questions, but they all felt too big to ask. Where had she come from? Why had she brought an army? What was this mission she kept talking about? And most importantly, what role did he play in all of this? He finally spoke, his voice uncertain. "What's going on, Aurelia? Why are you here? What is all of this about?" Aurelia looked at him, her expression softening. "I know this is overwhelming, Jason. It's a lot to take in all at once, and I'm sorry for that. But there are things happening that require urgency, and I couldn't wait any longer to explain." Jason sat down, trying to steady his breathing. He had never imagined that his life would take such a drastic turn. He thought of himself as an ordinary guy, someone who played games, worked a 9-to-5 job, and spent most of his time online. But now, he was sitting in the middle of a situation that defied everything he had ever known. Aurelia continued, "I'm not from Earth. I'm part of an alliance of species from different worlds, united for a common purpose. And Earth is an important part of that purpose." Jason felt his stomach churn. He had read about space exploration and intergalactic politics in science fiction, but it was all just stories. This wasn't a story. It was real, and it was happening to him. "We're here," Aurelia went on, "because the galaxy is facing a great threat. There's an empire, a powerful force that seeks to dominate everything. They've already conquered many planets, and now they're making their move on yours." Jason stared at her, trying to understand the enormity of what she was saying. "Why Earth? Why does this empire want our planet?"
Aurelia's eyes darkened. "Earth holds something of great value."
"Something that the empire is desperate to control. It's not just the planet itself, but the resources it contains, the people, and the potential you all have. Humanity has a unique place in the universe. You don't realize it yet, but Earth is key in the struggle against the empire." Jason didn't know whether to believe her. It sounded like something out of a movie, but the seriousness in her voice and the presence of her soldiers made it impossible to ignore. There was something bigger at play here, something beyond his understanding. He ran his hands through his hair. "So, what do you want from me?" "I'm just a guy who spends most of his time online. I don't know anything about fighting or space politics." Aurelia smiled again, but this time it was a softer, warmer smile. "You're more important than you think, Jason. Humanity's strength lies in its resilience, its ability to adapt, and its creativity. That's why I've come to you. You have a unique understanding of how things work on this planet. Your knowledge of Earth's systems, your technology, your people, how you think, can help us." Jason shook his head. "But I don't even know where to start." "How am I supposed to help you?" Aurelia leaned forward slightly. "You're going to help us by using your knowledge of Earth. We need someone who understands how to navigate the way things work here, someone who can think like a human, not just an outsider. You'll help us make critical decisions that could alter the course of this mission." Jason still didn't fully understand, but he could tell that Aurelia was being honest. She wasn't trying to manipulate him. She was trying to include him in something far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The weight of it all was starting to settle on his shoulders. "I've already gathered a small team of specialists from different species," Aurelia continued. "We've studied your planet from afar, but we need someone who understands the subtle nuances of Earth. Someone who knows what makes your species tick." Jason glanced at the soldiers standing in the corner. They were watching him closely, but not with hostility, more like protectiveness. They were here for one reason: to ensure the success of Aurelia's mission. But Jason still couldn't wrap his head around the idea that he was being asked to be a part of something so important. "I don't know," Jason said slowly. "I'm just a regular guy." "What if I mess it all up?" Aurelia's expression softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "You won't mess it up. That's why I chose you. I've seen how you think, how you approach problems. You have the ability to see things differently. That's exactly what we need." Jason didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to reject this entire situation and go back to his normal life, but deep down he knew that wasn't possible. This wasn't a situation he could ignore. The stakes were too high. Aurelia stood up and walked over to the window. The sunlight from outside cast a soft glow on her, making her appear almost ethereal. "You might not realize it now, but this moment is important. You're part of something that will shape the future of not just Earth, but the galaxy." Jason swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but he knew one thing. There was no going back. He had already crossed a line, and now he had to face the consequences of that. "Okay," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll help you. But I don't know what I can really do." Aurelia turned to him, a look of gratitude in her eyes. "That's all I need. Together, we'll figure it out." As she spoke, Jason realized something. He wasn't just helping her. He was helping humanity. Earth was caught in the middle of something far bigger than any of them had realized, and he had been chosen to play a part in it. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. His life had just changed forever. And as he looked at Aurelia, he felt something else, a sense of connection. In a world filled with uncertainty, perhaps he wasn't as alone as he had once thought. Maybe, just maybe, he was part of something greater than himself. With that thought, he stepped into the unknown. Jason spent the next few days trying to come to terms with the fact that his life had completely changed. He was no longer just a regular guy living in his apartment and spending his nights online. Now, he was part of something far bigger, something he couldn't even fully grasp yet. His mind kept returning to the idea that the galaxy was at stake, and that Earth's future depended on his involvement. The soldiers, who had remained mostly silent since their arrival, began to make themselves known more and more. They stood guard in strategic positions around the apartment, and Jason often found their eyes following him as he moved about the house. They didn't seem threatening, but their presence was hard to ignore. They were warriors, trained for combat, and yet they treated him with a strange kind of respect, almost like he was more important than he felt. Aurelia had stayed close, providing him with more information about the mission and their current objectives. She was patient with his questions, though Jason could tell there were still many things she wasn't revealing. Every time he asked about the details of the threat they were facing, she'd shift the conversation toward the next steps of their plan, avoiding direct answers. Jason was still uncertain about his role in all of this. He had always considered himself good at problem-solving, but he never thought he'd be put in a position where his decisions could affect the fate of an entire planet. The idea of strategizing on such a grand scale was overwhelming. What could someone like him really contribute to a cause like this? Aurelia had a different view. She continued to reassure him that his understanding of Earth's systems, its technology, and its people was invaluable. They didn't just need soldiers or advanced tech. They needed someone who knew how Earth worked on a fundamental level. Jason had grown up here. He understood the rhythms of life, the habits of its people. What he didn't know, however, was how to apply that knowledge to defend his planet from an alien empire. One afternoon, Aurelia invited him to sit with her at the kitchen table. The soldiers were still outside, keeping watch, but it was clear that they were waiting for something. Jason could sense the urgency in the air. It felt like they were all on the edge of something, waiting for the right moment to act. "I know this is a lot to take in," Aurelia said, her voice calm. "But we need to move quickly. The Empire knows we're here, and they're already making plans to strike Earth." Jason felt a chill run through him at the mention of the Empire. He still didn't understand exactly who or what they were, but the way Aurelia spoke about them made it clear that they were not an enemy to be taken lightly. She had mentioned that they had already conquered many other planets, but she had yet to explain why Earth was so important to them. "Why Earth?" Jason asked, unable to keep the question in any longer. "Why do they want our planet so badly?" Aurelia didn't hesitate. "It's not just about the planet itself," she said. "It's about the potential of the people here. The Empire wants to harness humanity's ability to adapt and survive. Your species has something unique. The way you think. The way you come up with new solutions when faced with impossible odds. It's something they don't understand, and it's something they want to control." Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at her words. He'd never thought of humanity as anything special, but hearing it from Aurelia made him see Earth in a new light. Humanity wasn't just a young, inexperienced species struggling to survive. It was a species with the potential to change the course of history. "But how do we stop them?" Jason asked, his voice tight. "How do we fight back?" Aurelia leaned back in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. "That's where you come in. We can't win this war with just advanced technology or brute force. We need to outsmart them. We need to anticipate their moves and stay one step ahead. And for that, we need your help." Jason was still processing what she was saying. It all sounded so overwhelming. He was just one person. How could he possibly help outsmart an empire with advanced technology and resources beyond anything Earth had ever seen? Aurelia continued, her tone soft but firm. "You've seen the way people think, the way they react in times of crisis. You know how to navigate the complexities of your society. You've studied it in a way that makes you uniquely suited for this mission." Jason didn't feel uniquely suited. He felt like a regular guy, uncertain and out of his depth. But seeing the determination in Aurelia's eyes made him want to believe in her words. He had no choice but to try. Earth's future depended on it. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking strategy, planning the first steps in their defense. Jason had to admit, some of the ideas they discussed made sense. Aurelia had a knack for breaking down complex problems into manageable pieces, and Jason found himself contributing more than he thought he would. Together, they mapped out ways to use Earth's resources and its people to their advantage. But even as they planned, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. They were strategizing for a battle, but the true nature of their enemy still eluded him. Aurelia had told him the Empire was ruthless and calculating, but she hadn't gone into any detail about who they were or what they wanted beyond Earth. The more he thought about it, the more questions bubbled up. Later that evening, Jason found himself alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the stars. The ship that had brought Aurelia and her soldiers was still parked outside, as silent and imposing as ever. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of forces they were up against. What kind of enemy would send an entire army to conquer Earth? What did they hope to achieve by wiping out entire civilizations? He thought back to his earlier conversations with Aurelia. She had said that humanity's potential was what made Earth so valuable. But what did that mean in the grand scheme of things? What was it that the Empire was after, and why hadn't she explained it in more detail? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Jason opened it to find Aurelia standing there, her expression serious. "I need to show you something," she said quietly. Jason followed her outside, his curiosity piqued. The soldiers stood at attention, their gazes fixed on the horizon, but it was clear they were waiting for something. Aurelia led him toward the ship, and as they approached, the door to the craft slid open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, a large screen flickered to life, displaying a star map. Aurelia motioned for Jason to take a seat in front of it. "This is the galaxy," she said, pointing to a cluster of stars. "The Empire controls much of it. They've been expanding for centuries, consuming worlds and enslaving populations. Their ultimate goal is to control everything, to bring all life under their rule." Jason stared at the map, his mind struggling to take in the vastness of what he was seeing. It was one thing to hear about this on a small scale, but to see it laid out in front of him was something else entirely. The galaxy was huge, and the Empire was spreading rapidly across it, like a dark shadow sweeping across the stars. Aurelia's voice broke through his thoughts. "And this," she said, tapping a spot on the map, "is Earth, the last independent planet in this part of the galaxy." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had heard about galactic empires in science fiction stories, but this was real. His planet, Earth, was the last free world in an entire sector of the galaxy. "Earth is a symbol," Aurelia continued, her eyes meeting his. "If the Empire conquers your world, it will send a message to the rest of the galaxy. They will show that no world is safe, that no species is beyond their reach." Jason felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He had known that the threat was serious, but hearing it laid out like this made it feel much more real. Earth was the last hope. If they lost, everything would be lost. "You said humanity's potential is what makes us special?" Jason said, his voice quiet. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Aurelia hesitated for a moment before answering. "I can't tell you everything just yet, Jason, but I'll tell you this. Humanity has a power that no one else has. You can think beyond what's in front of you. You adapt. You don't just survive, you evolve. That's why the Empire is so interested in Earth. And that's why we need to protect it." Jason nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything. He didn't fully understand what Aurelia meant, but he could see the conviction in her eyes. Earth had something valuable, and it was up to him, along with Aurelia and her soldiers, to protect it. As the night grew darker, Jason realized one thing. He wasn't alone in this fight. He had a role to play, and together with Aurelia, they could stop the Empire. The battle for Earth was just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jason's life, once so simple and routine, was now filled with constant planning, discussions, and new faces. Aurelia's soldiers had become an almost permanent presence in his apartment, though they were not intrusive. They were always silent, always alert, standing watch as the preparations for Earth's defense continued. Aurelia had explained to Jason that the Empire was not just a force of destruction, but one that used intelligence and strategy in ways the galaxy had never seen before. They were meticulous and calculated, and that was why they had been so successful in their conquest. Jason had begun to understand the weight of his involvement in this mission. He wasn't just helping a group of alien invaders fight back against the Empire. He was helping to protect humanity, the very people who had no idea what was coming. And for the first time in his life, Jason realized that his quiet existence could no longer be the center of his universe. He was part of something much larger than himself. The morning after the star map was shown to him, Aurelia gathered everyone in the living room. The soldiers stood at attention, their expressions unreadable. Jason noticed that one of them, a tall, imposing figure with a scar running down his face, watched him more closely than the others. He didn't know if it was a sign of respect or something else, but it made him feel like he was under the microscope. Aurelia stood in front of a holographic display, her eyes scanning the data that appeared before her. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady and calm. "The Empire's forces are already on their way. We've received intelligence that suggests they'll be arriving within the next few days, possibly sooner. Our window to prepare is closing fast. We need to move." Jason sat quietly, absorbing her words. The urgency was clear. This was no longer just about theories and strategies. This was about real, immediate action.
"We have to create a plan that will force the Empire to think twice before attacking," Aurelia continued. "We can't take them head-on in a conventional fight."
They have too many resources, too many advanced technologies. But we can strike where it hurts. We can exploit their weaknesses. Jason felt his stomach tighten. What could they possibly do against a force like that? The Empire wasn't just a military. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide. How could Earth possibly defend itself? "Aurelia," Jason said, his voice shaky. "How are we supposed to do this? You said humanity's adaptability is what makes us special, but how can we outsmart them if they have all the power?" Aurelia turned to him, her gaze softening. "It's not about power, Jason. It's about using what we have in ways they don't expect. The Empire relies on dominance and intimidation. They assume that their technology and their numbers will make them invincible. But we know the truth. Power isn't just about strength. It's about being unpredictable. They'll never see us coming." Jason was beginning to understand, but the weight of it still hung heavy on his shoulders. He had never been part of something this big. He was just one man, one voice in a world of uncertainty. But Aurelia had faith in him, and that meant something. He had to do this, not just for himself, but for everyone on Earth. The strategy meetings continued into the next few days, each one filled with detailed discussions and complex plans. Aurelia made sure Jason was included in every aspect, asking for his input on everything from tactics to psychology. She emphasized the importance of understanding how the Empire thought, how they operated, and how they could be outsmarted. Jason's knowledge of Earth, the way people reacted to crises, the systems that governed society, these things became the foundation of their strategy. They were no longer just talking about theories. They were talking about real action. The plan was beginning to take shape and the urgency was growing. Every hour counted. The soldiers practiced their drills, sharpening their skills in preparation for the worst. They were ready, but it was clear that they were waiting for one final piece of the puzzle to fall into place. Jason felt a mix of emotions. He was scared, of course. This wasn't just some fantasy anymore. It was real, and it was terrifying. But there was also a spark of hope inside him. This mission, this fight, it was something worth fighting for. For the first time, he felt like he had a purpose, something bigger than just surviving day by day. He had a role to play in saving his planet. On the evening before the Empire was expected to arrive, Jason found himself standing alone in his apartment, staring out at the night sky. The stars seemed closer now, somehow more tangible. They were no longer just distant points of light. They were part of a vast, interconnected galaxy, a galaxy that now felt far more real to him. He thought back to his life before all of this. He had been so content in his small, safe world. It was predictable. comfortable. But now, everything had changed. He was part of something bigger than himself, and the weight of that was both overwhelming and exhilarating. Aurelia entered the room quietly, her presence barely making a sound. She walked over to him, standing beside him at the window. The two of them watched the stars in silence for a few moments.
"You're ready," she said, her voice soft but certain.
I can see it in you. You've come a long way from the man who didn't think he could help. Jason turned to her, surprised by the warmth in her voice. I don't feel ready, he admitted. I don't know if I'll ever feel ready. This is all too big for me. Aurelia smiled gently. You don't have to be ready, Jason. None of us are. But we do it anyway. That's the strength of humanity. You might not see it now, but you're ready. You've been ready all along. Her words were comforting, and Jason felt a sense of calm wash over him. There was something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, that made him believe in her words. He wasn't alone in this fight. They were all in this together. The night passed quietly, with the soldiers continuing their drills and preparations. Jason, though, found himself unable to sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of the coming battle, of the Empire, of the stakes that were now higher than he could ever have imagined. There was so much to consider, so much at risk, but no matter how much he worried, one thing was clear. There was no turning back. At dawn, Aurelia gathered everyone in the living room once more. The time had come. The enemy was approaching. Everything we've worked for, everything we've planned, it's all about to be put to the test, she said, her voice steady and confident. We know what we're up against. We know their strengths, and we know their weaknesses. We'll hit them where it hurts, but we have to move fast. We have no time to waste. The soldiers stood tall, ready for action. Jason felt a surge of determination within him. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was a part of this team, and he had a role to play in saving his planet. The fear was still there, but it was mingled with something else, something that felt like purpose. Let's do this, Jason said, his voice steady. Aurelia nodded. Together, we'll make sure that Earth is safe. Let's go. With that, the final phase of the plan was set into motion. Jason joined Aurelia and the soldiers as they made their way to the central command point. Everything had been prepared. The defenses were in place. Now, it was time to fight for the future of Earth. As they moved out, Jason looked up at the sky once more. The stars were no longer just distant points of light. They were part of the story, part of the battle that was about to unfold. And no matter what happened, Jason knew one thing. Earth would never be the same again. This was the moment. This was the fight, and he was ready.